Good day everyone, we're the Group 10 and our topic for today is about individual or group checklists in problem solving in mathematics. So for today's lesson, we will know about checklists and observation checklists. We will learn to identify the two checklists which are individual checklists and group checklists. We will also learn how individual or group checklist is utilized in problem solving in mathematics. By the way, I'm the first reporter, Nathaniel Beltran, and first, we will discuss what is checklist. Checklist, by definition, is a tool for identifying the presence or absence of conceptual knowledge, skills, or behaviors. So, a checklist is a useful tool for recording. Example for the teachers. Teachers can use checklists for them to record students who are absent or present. Teachers can record students who are late or who pass activities on time, or students who are mainly missing activities or anything. Teachers can record it all with the use of checklists. Checklist, by definition, also is used for identifying whether key tasks in a procedure, process, or activity have been completed. So a checklist is also helpful for us students if we have so many activities to be done. With the use of checklists, everything will be organized and we can identify easily which activity have been completed. So there are some advantages and disadvantages of using checklists. Let's go through the advantages of using checklists. So the first advantage of using checklists is that a checklist allows inter-individual comparison. As I've said earlier, a checklist, by definition, it is a tool for identifying or evaluating in the presence or absence of conceptual knowledge, skills, or behavior. So with the use of checklists, it allows the teacher to determine what kind of student he or she is or what is his or her behavior basing on what the teacher observed. So another advantage of using checklists is that they provide a simple method to record observation. As what I've said earlier, a checklist is very useful for recording basing on what we observe, especially for the teachers, kung unsa ang nakita sa teacher sa iyang estudyante, mapunay na record sa iyang checklist. So, another advantage of using checklists is that they are adaptable to subject matter areas. It is very useful ang checklist kung bisag unsa pa imong gamiton, like kung unsa imong gi-observe, it is very useful ang checklist. So another advantage of using checklists is that it is useful in evaluating learning activities expected to be performed. As what I've katong sa definition nato sa checklist, it is used for identifying whether key tasks in a procedure, process, or activity have been completed. Ang checklist is magamit ni siya para mag-evaluate kung naanabay na human nga task or naanabay na human nga or na mga activities nga pagabuhaton pa. So with the use of checklist, dahil maka-determine or ma-record na tanan kung unsa ang imong na-observe sa basing sa learning activities. Another advantages of using checklists is that they are helpful in evaluating procedure work. As of katunggingan na ganiha nga, it is useful in evaluating learning activities expected to be performed. So a checklist is very useful for evaluating a certain work or a certain learning activity. So a properly prepared checklist allows the observer to constrain the direct attention. So, checklists have objectively to evaluate the characteristics, diba? Ang checklist allows us to identify or to determine an individual comparison, diba? Maka-compare maka sa checklist, diba? So, with the use of checklists, we can evaluate the characteristics of every individual, if he or she is always absent or he or she is always present. So, with the use of checklists, we can evaluate the different characteristics of an individual. So the last advantage of using checklists is that it decreases the chances of errors in observation. So let's go to the disadvantage of using checklists. The first disadvantage of using checklists is that checklists don't indicate quality of performance, so the useful of checklist is limited. So kung unsa ray nakita sa teacher, kung unsa ray na-observe sa teacher, mura na ijang mubutang sa ijang checklist without anything. But nagbase ra sa point of view ra sa teacher. So, another disadvantage of using checklists is that only a limited component of overall performance can be evaluated. So for example, a teacher wants to observe the performance of the students. Ang sud sa checklist sa teacher kay excellent, good, and needs improvement. So kung unsay nakita sa teacher sa performance sa mga estudyante, mura to iyang checkan. Tintay nice ang performance sa mga estudyante. Antay excellent na. Excellent ra to checkan sa teacher. Ug mura to'y masud sa base sa nakita sa teacher sa mga estudyante nga performance. Bali mura to'y na-evaluate sa teacher basing on what he or she iyang nakita. So, limited ra ang checklist. Kay magbase raman sa kung unsa imong nakita or kung unsa imong na-observe, kung unsa pod ang naa sa imong checklist. So, another disadvantage of using checklists is that only the presence or absence of an attribute, behavior, or performance or parameter may be assured. Like sa checklist, kung kinsa ray present, mo na to'y ibutang na sa teacher. Kung kinsa absent, mo na po to'y ibutang. Or kung unsa ang behavior sa usa ka estudyante, mo na i-list sa teacher sa iyang checklist. Bali, mo ra limited ra ang ibutang sa teacher sa iyang checklist. Another is that it has limited use in qualitative observation. Nagbase ra ang checklist sa kung unsa imong na-observe, the quality, kung unsa ang behavior, the characteristics of every individual. So nga na ang checklist. Nga na ang disadvantage sa checklist. So the last disadvantage of using checklists is that checklists are not easy to prepare. It needs time management pa para makahimo ka og checklist since daghan makag-observe nagbase maka kung unsa imong gi-preparean or kung unsa imong gusto nga i-observe. That's why disadvantage lang sa checklist is that dili siya sayon i-prepare. So that's all about the advantages and disadvantages of using checklists. And now let's proceed to observation checklist. So what is observation checklist? So by definition, it is a strategy to monitor specific skills, behavior, or dispositions of individual students or all of the students in the class. With the use of observation checklists, the teacher can identify or can monitor the skills or the behaviors or the positions of individual students or all of the students in the class, meaning kung saan nakita sa teacher or kung saan behavior sa mga estudyante or kung saan nakita nga behavior sa teacher sa iyang estudyante mo na iyang record sa iyang checklist. So it is also a record-keeping device for teachers to use to keep track of who has mastered the target skills and who still needs help. So, ari, mag-identify si teacher kung nabay estudyante nga need patabangan or needs improvement or ma-identify si teacher kung kani mga bataa mga excellent ni. Bale, ingan ha, ma-record na sa teacher tanan kasi sa iyang na-observe sa iyang mga estudyante. So, there are some reasons why we should use observation checklist or why we should use as a future indicator the observation checklist. The first reason is that it provides a quick and easy way to observe and record many of the skills, criteria, and behaviors. So with the use of observation checklist, the teacher can identify or can monitor the students if he or she is or excellent in the class or needs pag-improvement ang isa ka estudyante. So another reason why we should use observation checklist is that it shows the area of concern early. Meaning, kintahay sa isa ka class, in the class. Naman dyan mga estudyante nga mga bright or mga excellent nga mga estudyante. Huwag na po yung mga estudyante nga igo-igo ra or kanang mga estudyante nga needs pa og improvement. So ana nga both types of the students makadetermine ka with the use of the observation checklist kung ay kanidi ay nga estudyante need pa din tabangan. Iwa pa na siya kasabot ani nga topic. So with the use of observation checklist, the teacher can monitor the skills or the level of cognitive knowledge of every student. And the last reason why we should use observation checklist is that it provides the opportunity to change gears in a classroom if a large percentage of students are not doing well. So with the use of observation checklist, a teacher can identify if there are some students who needs improvement or there are some students who are excellent in the class. So that's all about the checklist and the observation checklist. And now I will give the floor to the next reporter, Mr. Jason Malato, to discuss more about the checklist and the individual or group checklist in problem solving in mathematics.
Thank you for that, Ms. Beltran. Now we are going to tackle about the characteristic of checklist. So the checklist should have criteria for success based on expected outcomes. Be short enough to be practical. Like for example is one sheet of paper. Have tasks chunked into logical section or flow from start to finish. And it highlights critical tasks. The checklist should have sign-off points that prevent students from proceeding without approval if needed. Be written with clear, detailed wording to minimize the risk of misinterpretation. Have space for other information such as the student's name, date, the course, the examiner, and the overall result. And the checklist should be reviewed by other instructors. So the format of checklists are often presented as lists with small check boxes down the left hand or right side of the page. A small tick or check mark is drawn in the box after the item has been completed. So this is how we write or form a checklist based on the given format. But you can actually use another example of the checklist form. And I will show it to you later on as we go along with our discussion. So how should we use observation checklist? But before that, observation checklist is classified into two. These are the individual checklist and the group checklist. But first, let's define what is individual checklist. So individual checklist define or use with students on an individual basis learning proper. It may be done one-on-one or may be done during class activities. So this is another example of a checklist. As I said earlier, it is the form of checklist that answered as yes or no. So for example, you are trying to solve a problem. So this following question should be asked. Did the learners accept the challenge in problem solving willingly? So you may answer yes or no. Did the learner answer completely using correct mathematical terms and symbols? Did the learner see and or analyze relationships and make a connection? Did the learner apply knowledge learned from the previous learning task? Or did the learner reason and explain appropriately? So these are just the few questions that is evaluated individually. So the next checklist is the group checklist. It is defined as the same as the individual, but it is more generic or global in scope of material. The criteria usually consist of degree of performance. Such headings would include not yet mastered, beginning of mastery, and mastery level performance. So this is an example of a group checklist, and it is evaluated grouply, or you are giving the students a group activity or project. So these questions may evaluated during that collaboration activity. So the first question is, did everybody know what they had to do? You may answer this yes or no. Did anybody feel left out? Did everyone participate? Was there any argument? How was it resolved? Were all members contributing? So again, this is just a few questions that is evaluated grouply. So next is how checklist is utilized in problem solving in mathematics. So we are now here at a checklist that is related to our specialization, which is mathematics. But before that, let's define what is problem solving checklist. So it is a checklist that can be used by a student and or class that outlines the steps necessary to complete simple or complex math problem. It might include an approach or a step-by-step algorithm for solving math problems, and it helps students to master simple and complex algorithms. So these are just steps in problem solving checklist as I used this in my examples. So the step 1 is you should understand the problem. Step 2 is devise a plan. So step 3 is query out the plan. And the step 4 is looking back. So this is an example of a problem solving checklist. So let's try to solve this. So a bear starting at point P walked 1 mile due south, then he changed direction and walked 1 mile due east, then he turned again to the left and walked 1 mile due north, arriving exactly at the point P he started from. So the question I have for all of you is, what color was the bear? So if we wanted to figure this out, we will use the problem solving checklist, and that checklist covered the 4 steps of what I have said earlier. Thus, we have to answer the following question. The first one is, what is the unknown? What are you trying to solve? So the unknown is the color of the bear. That's what we are trying to solve. So that is a check mark. The next question is, what are the data, condition, and constraints? So the only data we have are a bunch of directions and the fact that the bear is moving. So is there any connection with the data and the unknown? Because that's what we are trying to look for. That is a check mark. The next question is, can you solve part of the problem? Definitely yes. If we used graphical coordinates with this, maybe we could come up with something. So the next question is, can you draw a figure or diagram of problem? Yes, because isn't it interesting if we start at the point P and you only go 3 directions, and how can we end up at exactly at the same point? So I will going to show you a figure or diagram. So this is the diagram. The point P is located at the North Pole. So at point P, if we walked 1 mile due south and then we walked 1 mile due east and make a left and walked 1 mile due north, then we arrive at the same point, right? So the point P is located at the North Pole. So what was the color of the bear? Of course, it's white. So the next question is, did you use all of the available data? Yes, I did. I verify all the direction as stated in the problem. Next is, can you prove that the result is correct? So, how can we prove that in North Pole, uh, the bear is color white? So simple as that, we will going to search that on Google. Here. So what color are bears in the North Pole? So it is said that the polar bears have white fur. Thus, it is certainly proved that the answer is correct. Right? So the next question is, can you check the result? Do the math. Does it make sense? Yes, it does. I mean, this points to the North Pole and the very clever mark, right? So it does just make sense. So the next question is, can you derive the result differently? So if we try another problem or situation to the problems, I mean, if the point P is located at the South Pole. So let's make a diagram for this. So we have here, if I take a point P that 2 miles from the south, and then I go 1 mile due south, then turn around, then I go 1 mile due east. Thus, it came back to where I was. And then if I go 1 mile due north, then I arrive at the same point on the South Pole, right? So after figuring it out in a South Pole, it makes sense, or it came up with the same result. So let's try to search again on the Google if there are bear in the South Pole, or let's just search, are there bears in Antarctica? So we can verify the result that in South Pole and or Antarctica, the result says that there are no bears in there. What's the color of the bear? Of course, white. Now we know, or some of you know, that it was white. But that last part, I'm sure some of you gave you concern, especially in persons, and make a bet, because once you are in the North Pole place, suddenly maybe that's not the solution. Thus, by utilizing the checklist that Folio was given us, and we can verify this problem 100% true.
And that ends of our discussion of individual or group checklists in problem solving in mathematics. So thank you for listening. We hope that all of us learned something of today's lesson. Thank you, and God bless everyone.